Hello and welcome to another News for You live stream brought to you by Freedom Media WA. Free speech is a cornerstone of any democratic society. It allows individuals to express their ideas, their opinions, their beliefs openly in communicating to a vibrant marketplace of ideas, in particular the new public square, which is social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which is now called X, to name a few. Informed and open debates are essential to make well-informed decisions and holding those in power to account. When people are free to share their thoughts and ideas without fear of censorship, it fosters creativity and innovation. The ability to express oneself is closely linked to other fundamental human rights, such as the freedom of thought, conscience, and expression. By protecting free speech, we safeguard the dignity and the individuals. With all that said, what if this will no longer be the case? What if the government were to introduce law to stop free speech? Well, in case you haven't heard by now, that is exactly what the government is seeking to do. And to talk further about this, joining me now is Senator Ralph Babet from the United Australia Party, a new breed of politician who's at the forefront of opposing this Labor, Albanese government bill and other bills, I might say. And that is because this bill seeks to target free speech by citing it's either mis or disinformation. Senator Babet, thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this very important issue to the viewers of Freedom Media WA. Let's jump right into it. How concerned should everyday Australians be about the Communications Legislation Amendment, and even in the name, the Combating Misinformation Disinformation Bill 2023?
How concerned? I'll tell you how concerned. This is more dangerous to your freedom, ladies and gents out there, than potentially a standing army. I'll tell you why. Because this represents the gradual erosion of your ability to speak freely, both online and eventually as well offline. If you don't have the ability to speak freely, well, guess what goes next? Democracy is what goes next. Without the robust ability of the populace of any nation state to talk, to criticize, to introduce new ideas, to talk about bad ideas, to have free and open debate, you very, very quickly will lose the democratic system, which we all know and love so much. This new piece of legislation that has been proposed by the Labor Party is not just a Labor Party idea. The idea for this piece of legislation actually originated from that great party of the centre-right that cares about your conservative values, the so-called Liberal Party. That's where the idea came from. It originated just over a year ago under a guy called Paul Fletcher, who was the former communications minister under the Morrison government. So the Liberal Party will go out there and go, look what the Labor Party are doing. Aren't they bad people? We are the party of the centre-right. We are the party of conservative values. We are the party of freedom. We are the party of free speech. We will save you. Vote for the coalition. Vote us back in. No. The reason why we're here today is because of the coalition. Now, we both know that the Labor Party and the Liberal Party operate in a duopoly. We all know that. But do we know exactly how bad it is? I don't think most people know. Both of these parties are controlled by the very same special interests.
We did speak to the member for Monash, Russell Broadbent, the other day on this issue. And I was alarmed to hear, I put exactly that question to him, as you've just raised then, Senator Babet, that it originated with the Morrison government and the Australian Communications Media Authority proposed amendments to regulate social media platform, and it really just slipped under the radar whether it was in the cloud of COVID. That said, it's got through. And I asked him, did he really anticipate that it would be morphed into this bill now? And I found it quite interesting that he revealed that it didn't actually go to Cabinet. So he had no idea of that. Like yourself, is quite vocal. And I do want to say, so we'll just bring up now that if we talk about the Communications Minister, Michelle Rowlands, that she says that this, so there will be no targeting of individual pieces of content. there'll be no power to remove and request the removal of individual posts. There's no role in the for the regulator in determining what's true or false, and the platforms will continue to have that responsibility. When we look at that, and this bill, as you would know, it seeks to introduce hefty fines on the social media platforms that will enforce them to take a conservative approach and regulate and take people's posts down. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment, absolutely. Look, when you're giving fines, I think at the moment the fines are looking something to be around $6 million or potentially more to these social media companies. What do you think they're going to do? Of course they're going to comply. They're going to take down whatever you want them to take down. Now, we all know that big tech at the moment already censors all of us. I mean, I got reprimanded today on Facebook. So I actually shared some pictures from a Pride March that was happening obviously in public. I shared those pictures to my audience, and Facebook took those pictures down and gave me a warning for sharing sexually explicit content, even though this is what was out there in the public sphere. This happened in broad daylight. That's an example of how big tech censors people. But it's a whole other animal when now you have the federal government coming in over the top, and then the federal government saying, forget about big tech. We're the daddy now. We're in charge now. We're the arbiters of truth now. And that's exactly what this bill is. But the worst part about the bill, in my opinion, is it's not even, the government ministers that are going to be responsible for taking down things off social media that they deem inappropriate. It's going to be the bureaucracy, the faceless men and women behind the curtain who are always there. It doesn't matter if Prime Minister Albanese is in charge today, or if tomorrow the Prime Minister changes and it ends up being somebody from the coalition, possibly Peter Dutton. It doesn't matter. These faceless men and women, these bureaucrats of the deep state, as Trump calls them, agents of the matrix, they will always be there. It doesn't matter who is in power or who is out of power. They never go away. You can't vote them in. You can't vote them out. Giving these kinds of people such unfettered power over freedom of speech, over what you can and can't say online is a very, 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 very dangerous. Very dangerous. People at home, make no mistake. This is the first big nail in the coffin of liberty and freedoms in this country.
And I did see your post earlier today where you were talking, and I have seen the work that you've been doing as I've done. I've covered many of the drag queen storytime protests here in Perth, Western Australia. But in particular, you've taken task more recently about a book that one of the large retail stores was promoting. They were selling this book. Welcome to Sex is an innocent title, but this stream is not so much to talk about that. But there's some very, very concerning things. What strikes even more concern for me is that a current sitting member of federal parliament, yourself, Senator Babet, you have been censored before this type of this bill has come in play about taking a stance on whether that book should be available in a store where young children can read conceptual. I mean, it's insane. Madness. It really is.
Look, I'll make some comments on that. It is absolute madness when a federal member of parliament gets censored for anything, right? People have elected me to speak, to be their voice in our nation's capital in Canberra, to raise issues that they're concerned about. That's what the people that voted for me want me to do. And big tech, and soon to be the federal government, are now taking away, or they've been doing it for a while, but they're taking away my right to be able to represent my constituents. It is absolute madness. Nobody should be able to censor anyone. If you're breaking the law, if you're doing something illegal online, if you're doing something like that, calling for violence, I can understand that. But if you're talking about issues that are important to people in the community, if you just want to have your voice heard, then you need to be able to speak. It is not up to big tech to tell a grown man or woman what they can and cannot say or what they can and cannot see. I'll give you one very clear example of the type of censorship that we've all endured over the last few years. Let's say a world-renowned doctor comes out on social media and the world-renowned doctor says that X drug is safe and effective for X disease. The government will come out and say, no, we don't think X drug is safe and effective. You know what, big tech? Get rid of that. Get rid of it off the internet. All of a sudden, the world-renowned doctor is censored, and we don't get to hear the world-renowned doctor's views. That's an example of what has happened and what will continue to happen. Now, if you're worried about misinformation, if you're worried about disinformation as not less speech, not censorship, because when you have more speech, the best ideas, the better ideas will naturally gravitate to the top, and the worst ideas will be shut down by the people. The people will ultimately decide what is mis or disinformation. And if you want to live in a democracy, if you want to live in a free society, people need to be able to talk. Otherwise, you may as well pack your bags and move your butt to North Korea, because that's what's going to happen here in Australia. It's not going to happen straight away. No. It's going to take time. It's going to take 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years, a generation maybe. But the point is, the seeds are being sown now. The seeds are being sown now. And if you accept it now, it doesn't get better. Governments never give up power. Governments always take more power, and they take it from you, the people. So push back.
And I couldn't agree more. And as you said in your opening introduction, that this really is driving not just 1, 2, or 3. I mean, it's almost nailing the lid on the coffin. You say that it's going to take a number of years, but we've seen the censorship that's incurred through the pandemic, and also, as you say, the Australian Communication and Media Authority. That is the faceless bureaucrats that you've mentioned. And once this is put in place in legislation, the walk back will be incredibly hard, and that should be concerning. I'm just going to bring up a little bit now. This is from the draft proposal from that the government has out, and we can see here down at the point harm to the Australian environment. That's one issue, but harm to the health of Australians. Misinformation that cause people to ingest or inject bleach products to treat a viral infection. So that there, if you understand the history of that, that is an attack with something that's been taken completely out of context that Donald Trump said about that. So it's clear, the messaging, as you say, this is a deep state attack. And you gave one example. I'd like to highlight another example. And that is your parliamentary, the motion to establish the select committee. We can see the results up here. This is to have an inquiry into the Australian excess mortality rate. And if we have a look at just here, this back at the time was about 17.3% excess deaths. You sought, Senator Babet, to introduce a parliamentary committee that looked into that. The bill got voted down. And you gave a speech in Parliament. I heard that. I also wrote an article, and I'll just bring up now the particular, this is using the analogy there, that if 2 737 planes crashed, killing all those people on board for 11 months in a row, would the government seek to find out the causation of that? And the answer was no, but that's what you were seeking to do. That's not misinformation. The 17.3% excess death rate is not misinformation. And you were censored. It was blocked in Parliament. Posts that I've also made about that topic was blocked. So it really is. I mean, this is alarming. Yeah. This is...
Look, I'll make some quick comments on that. I'd also like to add, in that vote, Senator Canavan and Senator Rennick were also intending to vote with me on that one. But unfortunately, they were caught up in Senate business and they couldn't be there on the floor of Parliament to add their names to that. But they did want to vote with me. But obviously, it wouldn't have made any difference because it was just us 6 in a room full of people that didn't want anything to do with finding out why so many people had died for no reason that we really know, just causes unknown, basically. But it just goes to show you cannot trust your government, right? Any decent, in my opinion, right? Any decent people in power would want to know why so many of their constituents are dying for no conceivable reason that we can really put a solid finger on. But they didn't. They didn't want a bar of it. Yes. They wanted it swept under the rug, which is obvious by the vote there. They wanted it swept under the rug. They wanted me to shut up. Big tech wanted to shut everyone up as well, because obviously posts were censored everywhere for people that were talking about this stuff. And it's just one example of how, you can't give your government the power to officially now be the arbiters of truth. I mean, it's bad enough that big tech does it. It's bad enough. But when the government does it, it is a whole different beast, a whole different animal. And if this legislation gets up, you can be absolutely sure, darn sure, that the powers that they've given themselves will eventually be expanded upon over time. And even as the legislation sits today, even as it exists right now, it is so loose and so open that they can literally look at anything that they want and just call it mis or disinformation, from climate to medical things to the voice, as an example. Absolutely everything. It's so very loose. It's not good. It's terrible, actually.
It's not good. I'm going to bring up from the draft bill, and I do want to talk about when you say pushback, people need to push back, and that's something that I do want to talk to you about. Before we get there, I think it's important, and this is the draft legislation, and this is the content that's headed exclusion content or excluded content for misinformation. The government themselves have exempted them from this. And that is the point that you're just making right there. That should be raising alarm bells.
A quick comment, my friend.
Yeah, sure.
So basically, the government during the COVID period were the biggest purveyors of mis and disinformation of all. They were the ones that were completely wrong. Now, were they wrong on purpose, or are they just stupid? That is up for debate. I don't want to speculate on that. I have my own ideas. But the point is, they've exempted themselves. The government is exempt from being classified under this legislation as mis or disinformation, as are the universities, right? The woke factories of the university are also exempt, as is state and local government. Absolute madness. And you know who else is exempt? Big legacy media is exempt. So they've exempted themselves as well. Incredible. You know what? Who's going to get censored? It's just going to be you, mum and dad, sitting at home, you citizen journalist with your device trying to bring the truth out there. You'll be censored. No one else is going to be censored. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Just on that, people should, be grabbing their digital pitchforks and sending emails and making phone calls and reaching their local MP and saying, "Don't you dare support this." I mean, come on, people, get active.
And well, let's just take that a little bit further. I posed this to Russell Broadbent the other day, and I just said to him, without or asking him to tell people what to say, what is it that people can do? And I just said, is it simply a case of writing to their local member, their federal member of parliament? And I'll just digress a little bit. One of the things that we find, particularly here in Western Australia, is that we just do not have the ability to reach out for the likes of yourself. That's why we're absolutely appreciative of your time to be able to talk all the way from Victoria to here in Western Australia. Can we find somebody that's willing to stand up and echo the voice for people in Western Australia like yourself? No. Michaelia Cash, she voted your bill down that looked into the XF deaths. Anne Elliott, and Michaelia Cash is Liberal, and Anne Alley, Labor, she voted your bill down. We just don't have the voice. So, but can it just simply be saying that I have deep concerns about this, and that I can assure you, if this bill gets up, myself and my immediate circle of family and friends will not be voting for you next election. What do you say to that?
Look, I talk about this quite a bit whenever I get the chance, and it's to do with people at home taking more of an interest in the political process. For too long, I think Australians have had a she'll be right attitude, which is fair enough, because she has been right for such a long time. I mean, we've had one of the greatest periods of prosperity in anyone's memory, really. I mean, this is truly the lucky country. Everything's been great here. We've had no real issues in Australia, and because of that, I think the average person has not taken a great interest in the political process. So take an interest in who governs you. Take an interest in who you're voting for to send to Canberra to stand up for the things that you care about. Figure out what these people's backgrounds are, where they come from, what their policies are, what their ideas are before you vote for them. For too long, people have gone into the voting booth and ticked either Labor or Liberal. So people traditionally think that the Labor Party is the party of the worker, of the little guy that's going to help you out. That is such a lie. The Labor Party is not the party of a little guy. The Labor Party is actually the party of big business and big corporations. If anything, the Liberal Party is the party, well, at least it was the party of the little guy. But what's happened now is the Liberal Party and the Labor Party have now become one and the same. They now do everything exactly the same. I'll give you an example. All right. The Labor Party wants to move towards net zero by X date in X way. The Liberal Party also eventually wants to move towards net zero, but in X way by X date. They both want to get there. They just have different ideas on how to get there or how quickly we should get there. On the voice, the Labor Party wants to enshrine the voice in the Constitution. The Liberal Party also wants the voice, but they say, let's legislate the voice instead. Both the same, right? No difference. This misinformation and disinformation bill, originally introduced by the Liberal Party, they didn't get it up. And now the Labor Party's picked it up, and now the Labor Party's going to run with it. So now they're going to try and introduce it. Exactly the same. These two major parties are controlled by the very same special interests. Now, it's not enough for you to sit at home now and send an email or, join a petition and all these kind of things. Yes, you should still do that, but it's not enough. It's not enough for you to pick up the phone and call your local member. It's not enough. They'll just ignore you. What you need to do is you need to find out where their office is, go to their office, knock on the door, and ask for a meeting with your local member. Chances are they'll be busy or something like this. Make an appointment. Come back, be courteous, be firm and say, look, you're my representative. I care about where this country is headed, and I want you to not support this bill. You're going to have to get up off your ass. No more emails, no more phone calls. Go to their office. And at the next election, which will be here in a year and a half, it's around the corner. When you're deciding on who to vote for, I urge you, do not vote for the Labor Party and do not vote for the Liberal Party. They are done. There is no hope for these two parties. It is over. You're going to have to look at other minor parties. Obviously, I'd like it if it was United Australia Party, but even if it's not my party, another party, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Just don't support the establishment anymore because they're both the same, like I explained. They both don't care about you. The only thing that they will guarantee is that you will wake up one day destitute, poor, and broke in the country that you love so much because the establishment will take absolutely everything from you. That's what they want.
From somebody who is walking within the corridors of federal parliament, that's fantastic insight that you provide there. That you're saying, imagine people coming to your office, and that's the step that you're going to, very busy man. I understand this. I've been trying to schedule a number of interviews with you for some time. And it's not that you don't want to do this, it's the fact that you're so busy and booked out. But having that impact of the public, getting off their ass, as you said, and going, even if you're not there next week, Parliament's sitting, so you're not going to be there, but your staffer will still be giving you that feedback saying,
correct,
we had X amount of people come to the office today. And I think the important part that I would like to say, and you've said this, and just to reinforce this, that people need to be courteous, don't be disruptive, be polite, but make your point. You have a right to go to your federal member's office and knock on the door and ask for that appointment. You have that right.
Well, correct. I mean, that's what you elected these people for, right? That's what I'm elected for. So I actually take this one step further. I actually organize meetings where I ask constituents to come in on specific days and times. So I'll do small groups. I'll do small groups of 10, and I'll say, your group of 10 is coming in at 9 a.m. I'm seeing this small group of 10 between 9 and 9:45. I have a 15-minute break. I have some water. I have a coffee. And then the next group comes in for for between 10 and 10:45, group of 10. And I actually sit there and I talk to people about what's happening in Parliament. I figure out what they care about. And then when I go to Canberra, I talk about it. So I'm very proactive like that. But as far as I know, no other member of Parliament or senator does that. I'm the only one, right? So what you need to do is you need to make it known to your local member that you're here, that you exist, that you're someone who's voting, that come the next election, you're going to be out the front of a polling booth somewhere handing out how to vote cards. You're going to be putting up banners. And you know what? If that politician wants it to be their banner or their face or their card that you hand out, they'd better start playing ball and do things that you care about. And if enough people show up to these offices, even if you can't get your meeting, right, the secretary will tell the elected parliamentarian,
yes,
hey, today we had 5 people there and they all talked about this misinformation and disinformation bill or whatever else it is. And that parliamentarian will think, nobody ever shows up here. To have
exactly.
If 5 people showed up, it means, 500 are thinking about it at home or even 5,000. So you have to keep that in mind. And you might think that you're only one person and you can't make a difference, but mate, I'm one person. Look at me now. Look what I'm doing. I'm not a career politician. I couldn't give a shit about being a politician. I'm only doing this because I have to. My hand was forced. I saw the country that I love so much being destroyed by these globalists and their agents that sit in Parliament today, that sit in the bureaucracy, that I put up my hand at great personal cost, at great personal sacrifice to do what I'm doing today. I'm not here because I want to be a career politician. I'm not here because I enjoy this. I'm here because I have to be here. And that's what people at home need to do as well. You've got to take responsibility. I took responsibility. Now you take responsibility. Do something about what's going on in your country. It's not good enough to have a whinge on Facebook. It's not good enough to have a whinge on Twitter. You've got to do something, boots to the ground. Get out there, get in the street, knock on doors.
Well, it's not good enough because having that whinge on Facebook, if this bill gets up, that whinge will not be able to be seen and heard from people. So I do agree, boots on ground. As an observation, even all this way over here in Western Australia, we certainly have seen that what you campaigned for within your electorate, that you've delivered that representation which you've said from the get-go. And perhaps an example that those that do follow Freedom Media WA will well know. A couple of weeks ago, we went to a Stand in the Park meeting with the Federal Minister for Early Childhood Education, Anne Alley. We went there to ask her, what does she feel about drag queen story time? And we were met with hostility. She called the Australian Federal Police on us, asking that very question, citing that we were being violent to her. And we just heard that's what she did. We were the only people that turned up, the only people. So that point that you say that if 5 people go there, the likes of yourself, you're already saying, well, last week nobody turned up. The week before nobody turned up. The week before that, no. So 5 people can be 500 people at home, as you say. Boots on the ground, it's definitive action like that, and hence the reason why you're local member. So we certainly appreciate the voice that you have been echoing on this issue and a number of issues. You have a petition online, and not taking away from the very essence of what you've said. It really comes down to boots on the ground. We will put a link up on that. When does that close? Your petition?
I don't remember the closing date exactly, but my petition will hopefully run in perpetuity because I want to, I need people to be involved. And when you sign up to that list online as well, I will be contacting you every so often with updates as to how the bill's doing. And I will be sending you behind the scenes type of stuff that I won't be putting on my public social media channels. So it's really important that, if you want to keep in touch with me, to jump onto that and put your details on there. Look, we are in the fight of our lives right now. We are in the fight of our lives, and
Couldn't
I don't
agree
think
more.
that people realise how close to the end we really are. If this bill gets up, if this bill passes, this is just going to embolden the government. It's just going to embolden the bureaucracy. And he talked about go and see your local MP. They're probably going to have their office in the suburb where you are right now, or a couple of suburbs over. They're not going to be far away. Chances are most people will probably only have to drive 10, 15 minutes maximum to get there. Most people anyway. I know WA is a big state. But the point is, they do care about this stuff. And for every person that shows up, it's going to make a massive difference. So you're not alone. Your voice is important and you can make a difference. Don't be disheartened and don't think that you're just one person, because that's what they want you to think. They want you to be disempowered. That's what they want. And the more hopeless and not powerful you feel, the more power they have over you. So don't let them do that to you. Get active, get involved, and make a difference.
I think the public need to understand that this bill, the gravity of it, and still, the more I read online, and probably perhaps you're receiving briefings on this, I really do wonder with some of the clauses within the draft bill whether the Communications Minister, Michelle Rowlands, has actually read all of the passages of this sections of bill. That's point number one, I guess. But, you mentioned that Labor are driving towards net zero. Liberal have the same concept as well. No Western democracy has been able to succeed with sustainable renewable energy. Nuclear is a dirty word. If it's a dirty word today, then this bill will ensure that dissent, that view, so it doesn't have to be COVID related, whatever the view can be, and that's an important issue, the energy supply of the country. You can't discuss it.
You can't. Look, can I make a comment on what you just said?
Sure.
I think you touched on something very, very important. So don't think that this bill is about COVID misinformation straight away. This bill, what it's really about, it's about controlling narratives. Mm-hmm. That's what it's about. And whatever narrative of the day is important to the government, or really to the establishment, the people in the shadows, the people who you will never see, the deep state, whatever is important to them at that time, this bill will be weaponized towards that particular narrative. Now, we can't foresee in 5, in 10, in 15 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, in 100 years, we don't know. We can't foresee what's going to be happening in the future down the line. But what we can foresee, though, is that the bill will be used to control whatever the narrative of the day is. So keep that in mind. They may ram this bill through and they may not use it for 5 years. We don't know. They may wait for the next, crisis or whatever it is to pop up and then they use it. So, you have to understand that, and I'm sure you do, but for your viewers at home, the people that run the world, and I'm talking about run the world here, not Anthony Albanese. Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, is a nobody. Anthony Albanese is a puppet. He'll come in, he'll serve his time, he'll do what he's told. He's beholden to global special interests, the people at the UN, the people at the World Economic Forum, the people at the WHO, yes. All those groups, and even more shadower groups than that. He's beholden to those people at some level. At some level, he is. One day he'll leave. The next guy comes in, or girl, and that person's also beholden to that same special interest that was never voted in and is not accountable to you, the Australian public. The point is, those are the people that really dream up these things, and they are thinking in decades. That's how they think. They think in decades. They think of generations. That's how they think. And with this bill, you really need to think what could happen in a decade, what could happen in a generation. How could this bill be used? Every time you're designing new legislation, you need to design it with the thought in mind of how can this be misused by a tyrant, by a dictator, by an authoritarian system of government? How could it be misused? And if the answer is not good, if the answer is it could be bad for the Australian people, then we shouldn't have it. We should just put it in the bin. That's what we should do with it.
I'd like to, if I can, close on two examples. One that I can just think of that you've mentioned. If we can put up the harms again. So we're talking point number 5, harm to the Australian environment, misinformation about water-saving measures during a prolonged drought period in a major town or capital city. So if we just take that particular one there and consider this, and this happens a lot. you have what here in Western Australia, and I'm sure you'd have similar, we have sprinkler bans. Right now in winter, if you run your retic sprinklers, you will receive a fine from the Water Corporation. Now, as a mum and dad, you inadvertently, the power goes out, the battery goes flat in your retic controller, your sprinkler comes on, you get the fine. Under this bill, that's a harm to the environment. If you then make a post potentially in saying, I received a $150 fine, but as I was driving to work, I could see the parks and the public spaces administered by the state and local governments had their retic on, but they're exempt. And you make a post about that, they won't come after you, they'll come after the platforms. They will not have that because you're exercising dissent and saying the hypocrisy of the government has the sprinklers on, I had mine on, it was a mistake, but I got a fine. Would you agree with that?
I would agree that the government can definitely use this legislation as it stands today, if it passes the way that it looks now, to control whatever narrative that they want. You know, I think at first they're not going to really crank down too hard. They're going to pass the bill. This is just my opinion. They'll pass the bill and they'll sit on it for a little while, but eventually they will start turning the screws. They absolutely will. And the worst part is they decide what is mis or disinformation. They just make the call. They just get up one day and say, you know what, that's misinformation, that's disinformation. Big tech, take it off. Otherwise, there's your fine, right? Very, very dangerous stuff. Look, people at home, please get active in the political process. This is a big one. This bill here has a potential to really eventually, not straight away, but eventually really change what our country looks like. I mean, it's bad enough now with Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and things like that, censoring people. It's bad enough now with just those guys. Imagine a whole other layer on the top of the government saying, we're your daddy now. Govern me harder, daddy, as Jared Rennick said once. That's what the government's trying to do.
That's perhaps, and I'll do. Well, this is the last point that I'd seek to make. I'd like to put to you. You're suggesting perhaps in your view the government won't clamp down immediately and hard, but what if they do, Senator Babet? What do you say about the timing of this bill with the referendum looming? Because we've heard the misinformation, disinformation quotes that are coming around. Linda Burney says it all every day. On my meeting with Anne Alley, I mean, she would have mentioned that at least a dozen times that I was quoting misinformation and disinformation, spreading lies about drag queens reading stories to 2 to 8 year old children when that's a fact.
Stop spreading misinformation and disinformation to whoever it is that is listening to you. Use misinformation and disinformation and fear. And I have never seen a drag queen, I don't know, do what you're doing, for example, go out and spread hate and do what you're doing, and misinformation and disinformation.
How are we spreading hate?
If it doesn't...
But what do you say about the timing of this?
Look, the timing, I have no idea because they haven't revealed what they're up to yet. So the Labor Party is very secretive in their dealings. They don't like to involve the crossbench too much, and obviously I'm a crossbencher. So I wouldn't be surprised, though, if they did try and ram this bill through before the voice popped up. I would not be surprised at all. I mean, at the moment, the Labor Party has the numbers to do whatever the heck they like. Obviously, in the lower house, they have the numbers overall outright, which is why they're in government right now. In the Senate, they almost always have the support of the Greens, almost always. So with the support of the Greens, let's say on this disinformation bill, the Greens say, yep, we're happy with that. Let's put it through. All they need now is 2 more crossbenchers to support them. And then the bill's a done deal. It's passed. But what you got to understand, people at home, is even if they don't get the support of the 2 additional crossbenchers, what's to stop them from going over to the Liberal Party and saying, hey, Liberal Party, which one of you wants to cross the floor and support us on this bill? And that could very well happen because, like we said before, the idea for this bill originated under the Morrison coalition government, under the Liberal Party, by a guy called Paul Fletcher, who was the former communications minister. There is absolutely nothing from them going across to the Liberal Party and saying, come and vote with us. So this bill, I think the fact that there is an overwhelming showing up of people at home knocking on those doors, like we mentioned before. And it's just what you got to do, people at home. You got to get active.
Well, when you put it and frame it in that manner, that's exactly the emails aren't really it. It's going to be bums off seat, boots on ground, as you said. And again, as I've said at the beginning, a very busy man. I understood that you were in between meetings and you were probably going to be ducking into a cafe to take this stream, but you managed to get back to the office. So for making that time and for your comments, certainly over here in Western Australia, Senator Babet, we thank you very much for that time. So you would probably expect you'd need to get your submissions in. The people can do that by the 5th of August. But in between that, Parliament does sit next week, but still go to the office. Still go into the office because the staffers will be feeding the messages back that people coming in. So thank you very much, Senator Babet. In closing to Western Australia, do you have a message? Do you hear much about what's happening over here?
Look, I know that Western Australia is basically a one-party state now. It's controlled by the Labor Party, so that's a real shame. I mean, whenever you have things like that happen, you don't really have a democracy, do you? Because you never hear the other side of the argument. And I'd like to say, to the Liberal Party, just a general comment to any Liberal Party people that might be watching this broadcast. Liberal Party, the reason why you're failing so much and the reason why nobody cares what you have to say and you're out of power in the whole country, apart from Tasmania, really, it's the only place where they still hold power, is because you don't provide a different point of view. And opposition must oppose. That is your whole purpose in life. You must oppose. You must present different solutions, different ways of looking at problems, different ideas to what your main opposing party does. You can't just copy the Labor Party, water it down slightly, and then call that a policy, or that's just not the way to do it. And if you keep doing that, you're going to keep going the way that you are now, and you're going to fade into obscurity. Now, that's okay with me if you fade into obscurity, because there are plenty of people waiting in the wings to take over the conservative movement, to take over the centre right, and that's at the moment that is the United Australia Party. We're quite happy to fill that gap if you don't want to do it, but get active in the political process, people at home. I'm just going to say it again. Change doesn't happen without you getting involved. You are more powerful than what you think. The establishment wants you to feel weak. They want you to be alone. They want you to be censored online. They want you to feel like you have no options. They want you to have a defeatist attitude. Kids are now getting, like 8th place trophies and things like that. That's not an accident. All these things are designed to make sure that you don't have a winning attitude, right? Mediocrity is good enough. That's what they want. Don't let them do it to you. Reach for the stars, achieve your goals, make your voice heard, and don't accept the garbage that the mainstream media and your politicians feed you on TV every time you see them talk. They're lying to you. They're professional liars. In my opinion, they're bought and paid for. And if they're not bought and paid for, then they're complicit and they're stupid, and they care more about their jobs and sitting in that comfy House of Reps seat or that comfy Senate seat than what they care about doing the right thing for their country, for their people, for their states, for their electorates. That's the problem that we have today, because you know what? They're all career politicians. No more career politicians. Next election, get off your butt and put yourself up as a candidate and run. That's what you need to do. Run.
I was mindful of your time again, but I would just like to ask you this question, Senator Babet. Do you feel safe and comfortable if you were to walk down the main street mall of wherever that is, where you are, and just walk amongst public? Do you have any safety concerns there? But I guess the point I was seeking to make is those in Western Australia would know the Premier Mark McGowan, he can't. Even more recently, because there is a by-election this weekend in the seat of Rockingham, vacated due to his sudden resignation, unexplained to the West Australian people. But he is still assisting and polling for the candidate down there, surrounded by security staff. So I guess...
Can I make a quick comment on that one?
Sure, yeah.
Our own state premier here in Victoria, Mr. Daniel Andrews.
Yes.
Last time I saw Mr. Andrews, he was in a motorcade of 3 armoured cars. I think it was 2 or 3 armoured cars surrounded by police officers. The guy hasn't shown up to his electorate office as far as I know, for quite a long time. And, he's just surrounded by security guys all the time. It just goes to show,
that's not democracy.
These people are on the nose. They are definitely on the nose. But, like I said before, you got to go to the office, be friendly, be polite, be firm, and try and get a meeting with your local MP.
And on that note, would like to say thank you very much again, Senator Babet, for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Brought to you by Freedom Media WA, where journalism should never be a government narrative. Like, share and subscribe to my channel to see real people telling real stories.